The woman sitting across from Oprah Winfrey held her teacup with hands that trembled slightly, not from nerves, but from the accumulated weight of 27 years of living with an intensity that most people couldn't survive for 27 days. Amy Winehouse's iconic beehive hair towered above her delicate frame, perfectly styled despite the obvious exhaustion in her dark eyes, which were rimmed with the signature thick black eyeliner that had become as much a part of her identity as her impossibly powerful voice. She wore a simple black dress that hung loosely on her thin frame, and the intricate tattoos covering her left arm told stories of love, loss, and the desperate search for something permanent in a life that had spun wildly out of control. At 27, Amy possessed both extraordinary talent and devastating vulnerability in equal measure. Her voice could channel the pain of generations, could make grown men weep with a single note, could transform personal destruction into universal art that spoke to anyone who had ever loved someone they couldn't save, including themselves. But behind the artistic genius was a young woman who had become trapped by her own gifts, imprisoned by fame she had never asked for, and tormented by demons that grew stronger even as her music grew more powerful. The familiar warmth of Harpo Studios had been arranged with special care for this interview, recognizing that Amy Winehouse required a different kind of environment than most guests. The usual bright lights had been dimmed to a gentler golden glow that wouldn't aggravate the sensitivity that came with her recent struggles with substance abuse. A small British flag sat on the coffee table between their chairs, acknowledging Amy's London roots and the cultural bridge this conversation would create between two very different but equally authentic forms of female empowerment. 300 audience members filled the tiered seating, but their energy was more reverent than usual, understanding that they were witnessing something rare, a glimpse into the private world of someone whose public persona had been shaped more by tabloid headlines than by her own voice. Behind the cameras, producers moved with unusual sensitivity, aware that they were facilitating not just an interview, but potentially a moment of healing for someone who had been performing her pain for so long that she had forgotten how to simply feel it. Oprah Winfrey sat in her signature chair, wearing a deep burgundy silk blouse that commanded respect while projecting warmth. Over 2 decades of conversations with troubled icons had taught her to recognize the signs of someone simultaneously reaching for help and pushing it away. And everything about Amy's body language suggested a young woman caught between the desire to be understood and the fear of being too deeply seen. The interview had been arranged during a brief window when Amy was clean, coherent, and willing to discuss her struggles with unprecedented honesty. It was July 2011, just weeks before the alcohol poisoning that would end her life and transform her from a troubled artist into a tragic legend. But in this moment, she was simply a young woman trying to make sense of a life that had become unrecognizable, sitting across from someone who had built a career on helping people find meaning in their most difficult experiences. Amy had come to the interview with specific intentions. After years of having her story told by others, tabloid journalists, paparazzi, music critics, who reduced her to cautionary tale sound bites, she wanted to speak for herself about what it meant to be Amy Winehouse beyond the headlines. She wanted to discuss her music, her influences, her hopes for recovery, and her dreams for a future that felt increasingly uncertain. But more than anything, Amy wanted to be seen as a complete person, rather than just a collection of problems. She was tired of being defined by her lowest moments, exhausted by the public's fascination with her struggles, and desperate to remind the world that behind the addiction and drama was an artist whose music had brought healing to millions of people, even as she couldn't find healing for herself. The conversation had begun gently, with Oprah asking about Amy's musical influences and the creative process behind her breakthrough album Back to Black. Amy's face had brightened when discussing her love for classic soul and jazz, her admiration for artists like Dinah Washington and Sarah Vaughan, and the way she had tried to channel their emotional honesty through modern songwriting. Music was always my refuge, Amy had explained, her distinctive voice carrying both strength and fragility. When everything else in my life felt chaotic, when I couldn't make sense of my relationships or my career or even my own emotions, I could sit at the piano and find something true. The songs came from places I couldn't access any other way. She had spoken about the cathartic process of transforming personal pain into universal art, about how writing and performing had initially felt like therapy until the success and scrutiny made it feel more like exposure. But as the conversation deepened, it became clear that Amy had come prepared to discuss more than just her artistic process. She wanted to confront the public perception of her as a cautionary tale, to complicate the narrative that had reduced her to a symbol of talent destroyed by excess. Amy, Oprah said gently, you've been very open about your struggles with addiction and the impact it's had on your life and career. What do you want people to understand about that experience? Amy set down her teacup carefully, her hands steadying as she prepared to address the subject that had defined her public image for the past several years. I want them to understand that addiction isn't a choice you make one morning when you wake up deciding to destroy your life, she said, her voice carrying the weight of hard-earned wisdom. It's something that develops gradually, often as a way of coping with pain or pressure that feels too overwhelming to handle any other way. She paused, looking directly at Oprah with eyes that held both defiance and vulnerability. For me, it started as a way to manage anxiety about performing, about the pressure of success, about living up to expectations that felt impossible to meet. I was 23 years old when my album went global, and suddenly everyone had opinions about who I should be, how I should look, what I should sing about, how I should live my life. Her voice grew more intense as she continued. The substances weren't about getting high or having fun. They were about making the noise stop. The criticism, the pressure, the constant scrutiny of every choice I made. When you're in the public eye at that level, you lose the right to make mistakes privately, to figure yourself out without everyone watching and judging. The studio was completely silent. 300 people, recognizing that they were hearing something unprecedented, complete honesty from someone who had been reduced to tabloid headlines. But the irony, Amy continued, is that the things I used to cope with the pressure became the source of even more pressure. My personal struggles became entertainment for people who had never met me, who knew nothing about my life beyond what they read in gossip magazines. Oprah leaned forward, her voice carrying both professional authority and genuine compassion. Amy, you've been to rehabilitation several times. What has that process taught you about yourself and about recovery? Amy's expression grew more complex, reflecting the ongoing struggle between hope and exhaustion that defined her relationship with sobriety. I've learned that recovery isn't just about stopping the behavior, it's about understanding why you started it in the first place, she said slowly. For me, that meant confronting the fact that I had never learned how to handle intense emotions without numbing them, how to deal with criticism without taking it as a personal attack on my worth as a human being. She picked up her teacup again, using the warmth to steady herself. I've also learned that recovery is something you have to choose every single day, sometimes every single hour. It's not something you achieve once and then maintain automatically. It requires constant vigilance, constant recommitment to the idea that your life is worth saving, even when it doesn't feel that way. Her voice became quieter, more introspective. The hardest part isn't the physical withdrawal or even the cravings. It's learning to live with your emotions at full intensity without any buffer. When you've been numbing yourself for years, feeling everything suddenly can be overwhelming. Happy moments feel too intense. Sad moments feel unbearable. And ordinary frustrations feel like emergencies. The audience was captivated by Amy's articulate description of struggles that most people only understood through sensationalized media coverage. What keeps you motivated? to continue working toward recovery? Oprah asked. Amy was quiet for a long moment. Then when she spoke, her voice carried a determination that seemed to surprise even her. My music, she said simply. When I'm clean, when my mind is clear, I can access something in my voice and my songwriting that isn't available when I'm using. The music I make in recovery is deeper, more honest, more connected to something larger than my own pain. She looked directly at the camera, speaking to millions of viewers around the world. I want to prove that addiction doesn't have to be the end of the story. I want to show other people who are struggling that it's possible to use your difficulties as material for art that helps rather than just art that documents destruction. Her voice grew stronger as she continued. I have songs inside me that I haven't written yet, albums that haven't been recorded, performances that could help people feel less alone with their own struggles. Those possibilities keep me committed to getting healthy, because I know my talent comes with responsibility to use it for something larger than just expressing my own pain. That's when Amy did something unexpected. She reached into her purse and pulled out a small notebook. Worn leather covers filled with handwritten lyrics, musical notations, and personal observations. This is where I write when I'm clean, she said, showing the notebook to Oprah and the camera. These are songs about recovery, about hope, about the possibility of growing beyond your worst moments. They're different from anything I've recorded before because they come from a place of healing rather than just hurt. She opened to a page covered in her distinctive handwriting. I want to make music that shows people there's life after rock bottom, that your struggles can become the foundation for something beautiful rather than just something tragic. I want to prove that talent doesn't require suffering, that creativity can come from joy and healing just as powerfully as it comes from pain. The audience was moved by Amy's vision of transformation, by her determination to use her experiences as material for hope, rather than just for art. Amy, Oprah said, what would you want to say to other young artists who might be facing similar pressures? Amy's response revealed the depth of her understanding about the relationship between creativity and self-care. I would tell them that taking care of yourself isn't separate from taking care of your art. It's the foundation for sustainable creativity, she said, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had learned through difficult experience. The idea that artists have to suffer for their work, that dysfunction is somehow necessary for authentic creativity, is a dangerous myth that destroys more talent than it creates. She looked around the studio, making eye contact with audience members. Your mental health, your physical health, your relationships, those aren't obstacles to overcome in service of your art. They're the resources that make meaningful art possible. When you're healthy, when you're supported, when you're connected to people who love you for who you are rather than what you can produce, that's when you can create work that truly serves others. Her voice grew more passionate. I want young artists to know that asking for help isn't weakness, it's professionalism. Taking breaks isn't laziness, it's maintenance. Setting boundaries with the industry, with the media, with fans who want more than you can safely give. That's not diva behavior, that's survival. That's when something remarkable happened. From the audience, a young woman stood up, tears streaming down her face. Amy, she called out, your music saved my life during my own struggles with depression. I want to thank you for being honest about your pain, because it made me feel less alone with mine. Other audience members began standing, sharing their own stories of how Amy's music had provided comfort during their darkest moments, how her honesty about struggle had given them permission to seek help for their own problems. Amy was openly crying now, overwhelmed by the recognition that her pain had been transformed into something that served others, that her struggles had created art that provided healing even when she couldn't find healing for herself. This is why I do this, she said to Oprah through her tears. This is why I keep fighting for recovery, why I keep trying to get healthy, not just for myself, but for everyone who has found something useful in my music, who has felt less alone, because I was willing to be honest about how difficult life can be. She wiped her eyes, but her smile was radiant. I want to make more music for them. Better music. Music that comes from a place of hope, rather than just desperation. I want to prove that survival is possible, that recovery is possible, that you can use your worst experiences as material for your best work. Oprah reached across and gently took Amy's hand, a gesture that conveyed both professional respect and genuine affection. Amy, what do you hope for your future? Amy's answer would become tragically poignant in retrospect, spoken just weeks before her death. I hope to continue growing as an artist and as a person, she said, her voice steady and clear. I hope to make music that helps people heal rather than just music that documents pain. I hope to prove that addiction doesn't have to be a death sentence, that talent doesn't require suffering, that it's possible to transform your struggles into something that serves others. She looked around the studio at the audience members who had shared their stories. I want to be remembered not just as someone who struggled, but as someone who used her struggles to create something beautiful, something that helped other people feel less alone with their own difficulties. Her voice took on an urgency that seemed to anticipate the limited time she would have to fulfill these aspirations. I want to tour again, to record new albums, to collaborate with other artists who understand that music can be medicine. I want to use whatever platform I have to encourage other people who are struggling to keep fighting, to seek help, to believe that recovery is possible, even when it feels impossible. She paused, looking directly at Oprah. And I want to fall in love again with life, with music, with the possibility that my best days are still ahead of me, rather than behind me. I want to prove that you can survive rock bottom and build something beautiful on the other side. As the interview concluded, Amy Winehouse stood and embraced Oprah with surprising strength, two women who had found common ground in their commitment to using personal experience to serve others. The studio audience rose in sustained applause, not just for a talented performer, but for someone who had chosen honesty over image, vulnerability over protection, hope over despair. In the weeks that followed, Amy's interview with Oprah would be remembered as her most hopeful and articulate public statement, a roadmap for the recovery she was working toward and the artistic evolution she planned to pursue. The notebook of new songs she had shown became a symbol of her commitment to transformation, rather than just documentation. When Amy Winehouse died from alcohol poisoning, just weeks later, the interview took on additional significance as evidence of the person she had been becoming, rather than just the struggles she had been surviving. Her words about using difficulties as material for healing rather than just for art became part of the foundation for how her legacy would be understood, not just as a cautionary tale, but as proof of the power of authentic artistic expression. The interview also became a touchstone for discussions about addiction, mental health, and the responsibility of media and fans to support artists as complete human beings rather than just as sources of entertainment. It reminded viewers that behind every public struggle is a private person fighting battles that deserve compassion rather than judgment. Amy's conversation with Oprah proved that the most powerful interviews happen when artists choose truth over image management, when they speak about their work and their struggles with equal honesty, when they use their platform to serve others rather than just to promote themselves. Her final television interview became a testament to the possibility of transformation, of growing beyond your worst moments, even when the outcome remains uncertain. The Soul's last song was not about endings, but about the eternal human capacity for hope, for healing, for using personal darkness to create light that serves others. Amy Winehouse's truth was that she had found purpose in her pain, meaning in her music, and the possibility of redemption in her commitment to recovery, even when that recovery remained an ongoing struggle rather than a completed achievement. Because sometimes the most important conversations happen when someone decides to speak about their struggles, not as excuses, but as insights, not as entertainment, but as education, not as endings, but as the beginnings of something better. Amy's truth was that she had never stopped believing in the possibility of healing, in the power of music to transform suffering into service, in the hope that her next song might be her best song. The tattoos on her arms told stories of love and loss, but her voice told stories of survival and the endless human capacity to find beauty in the broken places, to create art that matters from experiences that hurt, to sing songs that help others feel less alone in their own struggles with the beautiful, terrible complexity of being human.